Hello, you're welcome to another interesting class on social studies. My name is Vanessa Hart. The topic for today's class is harmful traditional practices in the theme cultural and social values. By the end of this class, you should be able to explain the meaning of harmful traditional practices. You should also be able to describe different types of harmful traditional practices in Nigerian communities. Finally, you should be able to suggest measures to prevent and stop harmful traditional practices in Nigerian communities. Every nation, state, and ethnic group have their beliefs and values which are unique to them. This is usually seen in their way of eating, dressing, and the languages they speak, which is known as their tradition. In Nigeria especially, every ethnic group is distinguished by their tradition. It is important to note that these practices and beliefs were established by their forefathers and handed down from one generation to another. These practices have been seen to have either positive or negative effects on the people. Now let's move on to look at what traditional practices are. Traditional practices are long-established beliefs and values of a community or society which are handed down from one generation to another, whereas harmful traditional practices are long-established beliefs and values of a community or society which, when practiced, bring about physical, mental, social, and health dangers or damages to the people. Some of these harmful traditional practices affect only women and children, whereas some others affect everyone, which include men, women, and children. Now let's move on to the types of harmful traditional practices. Many communities in Nigeria have been seen to engage in some harmful traditional practices. These traditional practices include 1. Infant betrothal, 2. Female genital mutilation, that is female circumcision, 3. Caste system, which is usually known as the Osu system, 4. Preference for male children, and lastly, maltreatment of widows. Now let's look at these types of harmful traditional practices in detail. Infant betrothal. Betrothal is a mutual contract between two families for a future marriage. In some communities, young female children are given out in marriage to older men. This has led to psychological effects on these children as they are deprived of their formal education, and some others are made to give birth at a tender age. This also has led to the reproductive diseases. Next, we'll be looking at another type of harmful traditional practice, which is female genital mutilation, that is female circumcision. Female circumcision is a harmful traditional practice which involves the removal of a part of the female genital organ. Some people believe that this practice will keep the female's sexuality under control and help her to maintain her virginity until marriage. But however, this has led these females to contract some diseases and infections. Let's move on to another type of harmful traditional practice, which is caste system or Osu. The caste system is an ancient practice in the eastern part of Nigeria that discourages any form of social interaction or marriage to a group of persons who are called outcasts. These persons called outcasts were usually treated as inferior beings and isolated from other persons in the community. Oftentimes, they were chased to the evil forest, which made them to run away from their homes in search of survival. Next, we'll be looking at preference for male children. In some communities, many families prefer to have more male children than female children. This is because of the belief that female children will get married and leave their father's home, whereas male children will have titles and inheritances. This led some men to marry many wives and some women to exchange their female children at birth. Now let's move on to another type, which is maltreatment of widows. A widow is a woman whose husband is dead. In some communities, widows are made to swear over the death of their husbands, they are made to shave their hair, and marry within the family of their late husband. However, these harmful traditional practices have gone into extinction as a lot of people have revolted over them. Now let's move on to look at the measures to prevent and stop harmful traditional practices. 1. We have public enlightenment. 2. Advocacy. 3. Education. And lastly for this class, enforcing laws against such practices. Let's go on as we look at these measures in detail. Public enlightenment. The public or masses should be enlightened through advertisement or other means on the dangers of these harmful traditional practices to prevent them from engaging in these practices. Next, we'll be looking at advocacy. Human rights activists and non-governmental organizations should create awareness to rural dwellers on the dangers of harmful traditional practices to stop them from engaging in these practices. Next, we'll be looking at education. Young people should be properly educated in their schools on the dangers of these harmful traditional practices in order to discourage them from engaging in these practices. Lastly, we'll be looking at enforcing laws against such practices. The government should enforce strict laws against these harmful traditional practices to prevent people from risking their lives and that of others. Having said all this, we have now come to the end of this class. But before we go, let's take a quick summary on what we have learned so far. We learned that traditional practices are long-established values and beliefs of a community or society, often handed down from one generation to another. We also learned about harmful traditional practices, and we said that they are long-established values and beliefs of a community or society which, when practiced, bring physical, mental, social, and health dangers or damages to the people. Next, we learned about the types of harmful traditional practices, which include infant betrothal, female genital mutilation or female circumcision, and also preference for male children. Finally, we learned about the measures to prevent and stop harmful traditional practices, and these measures include public enlightenment, advocacy, education, and enforcing laws against such practices. Now, to test our knowledge on what we have learned so far, let's take some test questions. Question 1. Dash are long-established values and beliefs of a community or society, which when practiced, bring physical, mental, social, and health dangers or damages to the people. A. Traditional practices. B. Harmful traditional practices. Or C. Harmless traditional practices. The correct answer is B. Harmful traditional practices. Question 2. All but one is not a type of harmful traditional practice in Nigeria. A. Infant betrothal. B. Female genital mutilation. Or C. Preference for female children. The correct answer is C. Preference for female children. This will be all for now. I'm sure by now you know the meaning of traditional practices, the types of harmful traditional practices, and the measures to stop or prevent harmful traditional practices. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.